Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my top 5 sewing patterns for t-shirts. Now, being a top 5 list, these are all patterns that I like. There are some, of course, that I like more than others, and I'm going to get into all of the details that for me make one t-shirt better than another. The fabric used for all of the t-shirts in this video is either a 100% cotton jersey or a 95% cotton, 5% spandex. So very similar in weight, very similar in drape, and the majority of the fabrics are from Fashion Fabrics Club. I know that t-shirts are really basic sewing projects, they're basic garments, but because we're comparing basics, it really all is in the details. So I'm going to start with number 5, which is the bottom of the list, and work my way up to number 1, being my favorite t-shirt sewing pattern, and tell you a little bit about each one, what I like, what I maybe don't like as much, and hopefully you will find some inspiration for your next sewing project. So let's go ahead and get into my top 5 sewing patterns for t-shirts. Okay, first up, number 5 on my top 5 list is the Closet Core t-shirt. Now, this is actually a free pattern, a free PDF download from Closet Core Patterns, and it has 2 views, both a traditional short sleeve t-shirt as well as a 3/4 length sleeve option. Also has 2 body length options. The first one is cropped and the second one says mid-length, but it looks like about hip length. And I chose to make the cropped version. The core t-shirt has a size range from 0 to 32, and that goes from a 31-inch bust up to a 60-inch bust. So a really extensive size range, which is great. Another detail of the core t-shirt is that it comes with a patch pocket. I chose not to include this on my version because I found it to be a little bit comically small for my preference. So I did not include the little patch pocket, but other than that, I made no alterations to this pattern or to any of the patterns. That's something to note. I haven't made any adjustments or changes. I've made each of these patterns exactly per the instructions. I will say that the instructions are very extensive. You can tell that this is a pattern made really accessible to beginners. Based upon my own body measurements, I decided to make a straight size 8 and the cropped view. And with each of these patterns, I'm going to take 3 measurements from the finished t-shirt just to have a point of comparison. The first one is the pit to pit, so when the t-shirt's laying flat on the table, the measurement from one armpit to the other straight across. The second measurement that I'm taking from each t-shirt is the shoulder width, so from the collar to the start of the sleeve head. And the third is the total length from the collar to the hem. So just to have 3 measurements to compare how each of these fit based on my recommended size. So for the core t-shirt, the pit-to-pit measurement is 20 inches. The shoulder width was actually the smallest of all of these patterns at 3.75 inches, and then the total length from the neck to the hem was 21 inches. So only an inch longer than it is wide. So a very cropped t-shirt. Also, I would say that the sleeve length is actually the shortest of all of these patterns. And again, that shoulder is the smallest. So it's a closer fit to the body at the shoulders and the sleeves. I have a few thoughts, and this is why this t-shirt is number 5 on my list. I do think it's a good t-shirt pattern. I think that the instructions are really extensive and really beginner friendly. However, a couple of points put this one at the bottom of my list, just personal preference. So first, I think that the pocket that they include is kind of comically small. If I were to include a pocket on a t-shirt, personal preference, I would want it to be quite a bit larger. I don't quite like how the front of the shirt is curved, but the back isn't. And I'm not a huge fan of the way that it curves in at the side, but that the bottom is still quite wide. It's kind of a strange shape on me. Also, the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch or about a centimeter, which is totally fine. But I did have a little bit of issue with the hem, the suggested hem length. Again, this is an easy fix, but for the sake of comparison, I did every step of the instructions as they were written because I wanted a true comparison, and they do say only a 5/8 of an inch turn up at the bottom of the hem and at the sleeves. And I think it just looks better when you have a more generous hem. And I think that because of that smaller hem, the bottom of the t-shirt tends to flare out a bit. It's a little bit wobbly, if that makes sense. I think when you have a more generous hem, the weight of that holds the t-shirt in a better way. So I could definitely add a longer hem. I could straighten the side seams. I could straighten that front hem. But then I'm, making a lot of modifications. So those are some of the reasons why it's at the bottom of the list. Number 4 on my list is going to be the True Bias Jessie T. Now, this is another free pattern that you can download the PDF. The chart recommended that I make a size 4, and so that is what I did. And I'll share again those finished measurements that I took from each of these. The pit-to-pit measurement on the Jessie T for me was 20 inches, so the same as the last. The shoulder, however, is 5.25 from the neckband to the start of the sleeve head, so it has a little bit more of a dropped shoulder. And the overall length from the neck to the hem is only 18 inches, so it's actually shorter than it is wide. And I believe that True Bias drafts for someone who's 5'5". So when I made this shirt true to pattern, it did come up a little bit shorter than I would prefer. However, it's easy to add length. Just something to note, it is a very cropped shirt. Seam allowance is the same as the last, where it's 3/8 or about a centimeter seam allowance. However, the hem for the bottom of the t-shirt and the sleeves is 1 inch. So the first one, the core tee, it was 5/8. For this one, a 1-inch hem, which I feel just looks and feels and hangs a lot better when you have a little bit more of a generous hem. I will say that the instructions are good. I do think that they're beginner friendly. I also think that the majority of t-shirt pattern instructions are very similar. So the process of making most of these, there's one exception, and I will note that when we get there, but the majority of these have you sew the shoulders and then do attaching the neckband. Then they have you attach the sleeve head, and at the very end, you sew the sleeve and the side seam kind of all in one go before you hem it. There's one exception to that rule on this list, but the majority of them follow that construction process. The Jessie T is a very boxy fit, so straight up and down on the sides, straight across the bottom. There's no variation between the front and the back hem, so it's just straight all the way around at one level. And I think it's a good basic t-shirt pattern. My only complaints about it really are that it's very, very cropped, and you may want to consider adding length depending on your height, depending on your torso length, and how cropped you like your t-shirts to be. It is a free pattern, it is a good basic, and I have actually made 3 of them. So the very, very cropped length might be a benefit if you're really petite. So again, this is a personal preference, personal opinions list. If you have a really short torso, or if you are quite short yourself, this might be at the top of your list. So that's number 4. Number 3 on my list is the LB Textiles Sage Tee. Now, this is actually the only pattern on the list that is intended for men. It is a men's or unisex pattern. However, it's a basic oversized t-shirt, and I find that it works really well for women too. Size range for the Sage T accommodates from a 34-inch up to a 58-inch bust, so a nice big size range. I chose to make the size A, which is the smallest one on the size chart, so that is something to consider if you are petite or if you are smaller than myself. This might be a very oversized t-shirt pattern for you. Those 3 measurements, those 3 points of comparison again. The pit-to-pit measurement for me of the finished Sage T was 22.5 inches, so a little bit bigger than the past 2. The shoulder was 5.5 inches, so again, it's meant to accommodate men's shoulders, so on me it's a little bit more of a dropped shoulder. And the length for me was 25 inches. It was draft for a 5'10" male, and I'm 5'7", so yeah, I do think that I cropped 3 or 4 inches off of the length. So I guess we could say 28 to 29 inch would be the total length if you didn't crop it. When I first made the Sage T, it was a free PDF download, and now there is a cost to it. However, there's a couple more options that have been added. There's a long sleeve version. I think there may be a pocket as well. So it also has a 1 centimeter seam allowance and a 1-inch hem, which is great. I think at minimum, I would like a 1-inch hem. It has the same way of attaching the neckband as the previously mentioned tees have. I will say that this is the one t-shirt that has a different construction than the others. So I mentioned previously, most of them have you attach the shirts at the shoulders and then do the neck, then attach the top of the sleeve, and then the side seam and the sleeve seam are sewn in one. This t-shirt doesn't have you do that. It has you attach the shirt side seams first, and then you have to sew the t-shirt sleeve shut and then attach that circle to the already constructed armhole. Side seams are really straight. The hem at the front and the back is just straight across. And I think overall, this one sits really firmly in the middle for me of my top 5 list at number 3. I love the fit. The construction is simple and straightforward. The instructions are good. And again, this is my top 5, right? So personal preference, but I love wearing a men's t-shirt. I often do. I love that they're longer, that they're more oversized, and this isn't necessarily the t-shirt that I'm going to be tucking in. This is a t-shirt that I'm wearing loose, and so the fact that it's a little bit bulkier and longer it's a great option to have. So number 3 on my list. Before we get into my top 2 t-shirt patterns, please do consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons below. Number 2 on my top 5 list is going to be the French Navy Madeline T. This is another free pattern. The size range for this one is great. It uses lettered sizing, so from A through N. And based upon the size chart, I made the size C. Now for reference, the pit-to-pit measurement here is 19 inches for my size, which is the smallest so far. The shoulder was 4.5 inches, so a little bit smaller than some of the others I've mentioned. And the total length from the neck to the hem is 23, so a little bit longer. The Madeline T is intended to be oversized, and what I thought was interesting was the instructions say that it has an intentionally long short sleeve, and it says, you know, it looks great when you cuff it. I didn't find the sleeves to be particularly long. I think that for me, the men's cut, the Sage T, had the longest sleeve, and personally, I don't think these sleeves are long enough that I would want to cuff them. It's just how it fits my particular body. It has a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I think is interesting because when you're sewing with knit fabrics, you're often using a serger or you're zigzagging the edge of the fabric. And so with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're not cutting off any excess with your serger, you're just sewing the edge of the fabric. So that was kind of cool. You're not wasting as much fabric that way. And the hem is 3/4 of an inch at the bottom and sleeves. So a little bit shorter than that inch that I think is a sweet spot for a t-shirt hem, but still better than the core where it's a 5/8 inch. So it's a little bit more generous of a hem. This t-shirt pattern also gives you an optional binding piece for the back neck, which the core t-shirt also had this option, but it's worth noting that the Madeline T comes with instructions and a pattern piece for the back binding as well. It has slight curving in at the waist, and interestingly, this one also has a curved hem. So both the front and the back of the Madeline T curve. I think this is really useful if you are tucking in the front of your shirt, because where the front and the back meet at the side, you kind of have a little bit of break in the fabric where the curves meet, if that makes sense. And so if you're just tucking in the front of your shirt, I find that it sits really nicely. So there are a couple of reasons why this is number 2 on my list. I really like the curved hem, which surprised me. I like the curve at the waist as well. And I think that it serves a completely different purpose than those short boxy tees or even the longer menswear cut that's a little bit bulkier. This is a great one for tucking in, and it's a great one for layering. And I also really like the way that the neckband sits, as well as the sleeve length, even though it's not particularly long as advertised, and it is a free pattern as well. So because of the instructions, because of the fit, and because it filled a hole in my wardrobe for a t-shirt that I want to tuck in, I find that with the really short crop tees where they kind of hit at the top of your high-waisted jeans, they're almost too short to tuck in. And then with the longer, wider menswear cut, there's too much fabric to tuck in. So if you're looking for a comfortable, relaxed fit t-shirt that you want to tuck into something high-waisted, I think it's the Madeline T. Number 1 is the MWI Studio Madeline T. Now, if you've watched some of my other recent videos, you may have heard me talk about testing this pattern and immediately making multiple versions. I love this pattern so much. The Madeline T has a size range that accommodates a 32-inch bust up to a 60-inch bust, so another really great wide size range. And based upon my measurements, I made the size A, which is the smallest of the range. So those 3 comparison measurements, the pit to pit for me of my finished t-shirt was 20.75 inches. The shoulder was 5 inches, and the total length was 20.5 inches. So this definitely falls into the boxy cropped category. I'll say that the sleeve length on this one is a little bit longer, which I really like. The seam allowance for this pattern is 1 centimeter, so very similar to the majority of these. However, the hems are 1.5 inches, so it has a really chunky hem both at the bottom of the tee and on the sleeves, which I think gives it a really elevated, professional look. I think that it makes the t-shirt hang really nicely and the sleeves sit really nicely. I really think that the more generous hem with these t-shirt fabrics gives a really nice silhouette as well as fit. As far as construction, it is similar to the majority of these where the sleeve and side are 1 seam. I will say that this has the easiest to follow method of attaching the neckband. It does have notches, which I remember the first time that I did a knit neckband, and it's easy enough to quarter the circle that is the neckband piece, but it's a little bit difficult to truly find the quarter points of the t-shirt neck hole. And for me, as a beginner, it felt a little bit fiddly. I wasn't sure exactly how much to stretch the neckband when I was attaching it, and so sometimes it would be not even, like it would bunch up in certain areas. And so I just think that for a basic pattern such as a t-shirt where you're going to have a lot of beginners making it, just putting on those little notches on the neckband makes it so much easier to know exactly where to place the neckband and how much stretch between those quarter points and things like that. So this one definitely gets a thumbs up on the attachment of the neckband. It gets a thumbs up for sure on the deep hem. I think that that's something that I didn't know until doing this makes a big difference to me. I love the style of this one. I will say that it's drafted for someone who is 5'6", and I am 5'7", so I made my first one true to pattern, but then in subsequent versions I did add length both to the body of the shirt and to the sleeves. But again, that's just because I have a longer torso and longer arms probably. I wanted to keep the proportions of the intention of the design, so I just lengthened it a little bit. It's such a great t-shirt. I feel really fortunate to have been one of the testers, and I know that the instructions are great. I know that the fit is great for a wide range of bodies, and this is one of those like classic t-shirt silhouettes. It's not too cropped. It doesn't have any waist shaping, so it's a really boxy, comfortable fit. I think this is a well-deserved #1 on my list of top 5 t-shirts. So I will be sure to link all of these patterns below. Again, these are all great patterns. I would recommend all of them. I think that each one can serve a different purpose in your wardrobe and in your sewing journey. I think that if you're an absolute beginner, you're capable of making all of these shirts. Making a t-shirt is a really great first knit fabric project, and if you're a little bit worried about attaching and stretching the neckband, maybe try the Madeline T first. I hope that this was interesting. I hope it was fun to watch, and let me know below what your favorite t-shirt pattern is. There are many more that I did not mention in this video. I just picked my top 5 that I have made and that I wear and that I love. So let me know below in the comments if I missed something great. I would love to know. And again, if you enjoyed today's video, please do consider subscribing to my channel, and I will be back with another video very soon.